everyone, welcome to today's demo class. I'm from Global Business Program and I mainly teach economics and finance. Today the lecture content is about economics. I hope you can see the screen. So today I do not want to begin with a textbook definition of economics. I want to begin with the world you already live in. Imagine you wake up, check your phone, and immediately see complaints about concert tickets being too expensive. Then, at lunch, someone mentioned that rice prices have gone up in Japan. In the news, people are talking about the weak yen, Apple releases a new phone, and the price feels painfully high. The Bank of Japan appears in the headlines in news, and somewhere in the background, everyone is asking whether AI will change the jobs we are preparing for. These topics look completely different. Music, food, exchange rates, technology, central banking, and careers. However, economics gives us a way to connect them together. Economics helps us see the hidden logic behind everyday events. By the end of this short demo class, I'd like you to feel that economics is not just about graphs or equations or numbers. It is a practical way to understand why the world moves the way it does and how we can make better decisions inside that world. So, let us start with 7 mysteries. First, why are concert tickets so expensive? If a singer is already famous and wealthy, why not make tickets cheaper for fans? Second, why did rice prices rise? Rice is such a basic product in Japan, so why can the price suddenly feel unstable? Third, why has the yen become weaker? What does that actually mean in our daily life? Next, why are iPhones more expensive? Is it only because companies want profit, or is there a broader story behind it? Fifth, why does the Bank of Japan matter? Most of us do not borrow directly from the central bank, the Bank of Japan in Japan. So why should we care what the Bank of Japan announces? 6. Why will AI change your career? And finally, what can economics teach us about making better decisions? The premise of today's demo class is very simple. Different stories, same economic logic. Economics is useful because it gives us a language for connecting what first appears disconnected. So, what is economics? One common answer is that economics studies how people make choices under scarcity. That is correct. However, it can sound a bit abstract. So a more vivid way to say it is, economics is a lens. It gives us 4 questions that we can use again and again. First, what are people choosing? Consumers choose what to buy. Companies choose what to produce. Workers choose where to work. And governments choose policies. Second, what incentives do they face? Incentives are the rewards and costs that push people toward certain actions. Third question, what are the trade-offs? Every choice means giving up something else. Finally, how do individual choices add up into a larger system? This is why economics is powerful. It does not remove complexity. The world remains complicated. However, economics gives us a map. And even an imperfect map is much better than walking through fog. So let's look at the mysteries. Let's begin with concert tickets. Suppose a famous artist comes to Tokyo and millions of people want tickets. The first economic concept is scarcity. There are only so many seats or so many tickets in the stadium. The supply, therefore, is fixed in the short run because we cannot just suddenly create another 50,000 seats or tickets without adding another concert day. Now look at the demand side. Fans may be willing to pay very high prices because the experience feels unique. It is not just about a song. It is about memory, identity, social media, and the feeling of being part of something. When demand is huge and supply is limited, the market price tends to rise. However, the story does not stop there. Ticket platforms, resale markets, and dynamic pricing can amplify the effect. Economically, we can ask who captures the value created by scarcity? The artist? The platform? Resellers? Fans who got tickets early? This example shows that prices are not random. Prices emerge from demand, supply, market rules, and power. Now let us move from concerts to Rise. Rise is not glamorous like a concert, but it is deeply important in everyday life in Japan. When the price of rice rises, households feel it immediately. The basic model is the supply and demand model that you can see on the slide. On the diagram, we have two dimensions. On the vertical axis, we have the price of rice. On the horizontal axis, we have the quantity of rice. The upward sloping curve refers to the supply of rice in the market, and the downward sloping curve refers to the demand for rice in the market. This is the basic model called the supply and demand model. On the demand side, people want rice for home consumption, restaurants, school lunches, and food services. On the supply side, rice depends on harvest conditions, inventories, agricultural policy, logistics, and expectations. If supply becomes tighter, or if people expect shortages and buy more, the market clearing price can rise. So the first case, if supply becomes tighter, then supply curve is going to shift to the left, bringing up to a new equilibrium, the intercept between the two, leading to a higher price of rice. The second example, if people expect shortages and buy more, demand for rice is going to increase, so demand curve is going to shift to the right, leading to, again, a new equilibrium in the market corresponding to a higher price of rice. That's why we say the market clearing price can rise. The key lesson here is that a price is a signal. A higher price tells us that something in the balance between supply and demand has changed. It does not automatically tell us whether the cause is weather, policy, inventory, panic buying, distribution problems, or some combinations among them. Economics teaches us to avoid lazy explanations. Instead of just saying, prices rose because sellers are greedy, we ask, what shifted, who responded, and how did those responses interact? Next, let's look at the yen. When people say the yen is weak, they mean that 1 yen buys less foreign currency than before. Or they could mean that it takes more yen to buy $1 than before. The exchange rate is simply a price. That is the price of one currency in terms of another currency. Why might the yen weaken? One important channel is interest rates. If US dollar assets offer higher returns than Japanese yen assets, global investors may prefer to hold dollars instead of holding yen. To buy dollar assets, they sell yen and buy dollars. That lowers demand for yen relative to US dollars, and therefore the yen can weaken against the US dollar. However, exchange rates are not controlled by just one factor. They also respond to different factors such as inflation, trade, risk, expectations, government intervention, and central bank signals. This is where economic thinking is useful. It helps us separate mechanisms. Instead of just memorizing higher interest rates equals stronger currency, we ask who is moving money, what they expect, and how markets update when new information arrives. Okay, so now let's think about iPhones. A phone looks like one product, but economically, it contains an entire global supply chain. Components may be designed in one country, manufactured in another country, assembled somewhere else, and then sold in Japan in Japanese yen. So, as we talked about earlier, if Japanese yen weakens, imported components and imported final goods become more expensive in yen terms. Companies then face choices. They can choose to absorb the cost and accept lower margins, or raise prices, change product features, delay price increases, or redesign their product strategy. Consumers, on the other hand, also face choices. They can choose to buy now or to wait, choose a cheaper model instead, or keep the old phone, or even switch brands. So when students ask, why are iPhones expensive? The answer is not only Apple wants profit. Of course, companies care about profit, so does Apple. But the final price also reflects exchange rates, global product costs, taxes, logistics, competition, brand value, and consumer willingness to pay. So we can see that a simple phone price is actually a global economic story in your pocket. It is not that simple. Now, let us talk about the Bank of Japan, Nihon Ginko. Many people hear central bank and immediately feel that it is distant from everyday life. However, the central bank influences the cost of money. That matters for loans, mortgages, business investment, exchange rates, inflation expectations, and confidence. When the Bank of Japan changes its policy rate, it affects the financial conditions facing commercial banks. Commercial banks then adjust their lending rates. So companies that borrow from commercial banks respond by changing investment plans. If interest rate or loan rates rise, basically means it's more costly to borrow, so companies are going to borrow less and invest less. Investment is going to go down. Households who also borrow from commercial banks will also respond through borrowing, saving, and spending decisions. So, same as before, if loan rates rise, it will be more expensive for households to borrow from commercial banks, so they're going to borrow less. If they borrow less, they will have less to spend, so spending is also going to go down. Over time, these decisions affect output in the economy, employment status in the economy, the whole price level in the economy, and in Japan, the value of the home currency, which is the Japanese yen. The important point is that monetary policy works through channels. It is not magic. It is not instant. And it is not always perfectly predictable. But once you understand the channels, the news that you hear on TV or you see on social media becomes less mysterious. A central bank announcement is not just a statement from Tokyo. It can eventually affect the price of imports, the cost of borrowing, behaviors of companies in their investment, behaviors of households in their spending, and even the jobs available after your graduation. Now we turn to AI. Students often ask, will AI take my job? Economics helps us to answer or to ask a better question. And the better question is, which tasks will AI substitute for? And which tasks will AI complement? Most jobs are bundles of tasks. A professor does not only lecture. A professor reads, writes, advises students, designs assignments, answers emails, evaluates arguments, and makes judgments. AI may be able to help with some tasks, such as summarizing information or drafting the first version, but other tasks, such as judgment, empathy, credibility, and deep domain knowledge, are harder to replace by AI. This means the future of work is not simply humans versus AI. It is about new combinations of humans and technology. Some tasks will become less valuable because AI can do them cheaply. Other skills will become more valuable because they help people use AI more effectively. For you as students, the practical lesson is this. Do not only ask what job title you want. Ask what tasks you can do well, what tools will change those tasks, and what human advantage you can build. Economics also helps us personally. It gives us tools for better decisions. The first tool is opportunity cost. The true cost of a choice is not only the money you spend, it is the value of the next best alternative you give up. If you spend 3 hours watching videos, the cost may be 3 hours of sleep, 3 hours of study, 3 hours of exercise, or time with friends for 3 hours. The second tool is marginal thinking. Instead of asking whether something is good or bad in general, ask whether one more unit is worth it. One more hour of studying may be valuable before an exam, but the fifth hour at midnight may not be. The third tool is incentives. What behavior does a rule encourage? The fourth is sunk cost. If you already paid for something, that past cost should not control today's decision if it cannot be recovered. That's why it's called sunk. These tools do not make us perfectly rational. Humans are humans, but they give us better questions, and better questions often lead to better decisions. Now, let us make the model explicit. When you face an economic story, please try to use this 5-step toolkit. Step 1. Identify choices. Who is choosing? And what options do they have? Step 2. List the incentives. What rewards, costs, constraints, or risks shape their behavior? Step 3. Draw the market or mechanism. This may be a supply and demand diagram that we saw earlier when we talked about the price of rice, a flow chart, or even just a verbal chain of cause and effect. Step 4. Ask what changes. Did supply shift? Did demand shift? Did interest rate change? Did technology change? Step 5. The last step. Predict who gains and who loses from that. This is what economists mean by model. A model is not the world itself. It is the disciplined simplification of the world. Good models are useful because they clarify assumptions, mechanisms, and predictions. They help us think clearly, not because they include every detail, but because they organize the details that matter most for the question at hand. So now, I'd like you to apply what we have learned. Choose one mystery that we talked about before: concert tickets, rice, yen, iPhones, the Bank of Japan, or AI. Then, use the prompt on the slide. This happened because what changed, so what responded by what. For example, if we choose rice prices rose because the supply-demand balance became tighter. So consumers and retailers responded by paying higher prices and changing purchasing behavior. Or if we choose Japanese yen, the yen weakened because investors preferred US dollar assets. So demand for Japanese yen fell relatively to demand for US dollar. Please just take 1 minute or 2 minutes to choose your example and form one sentence. Since we don't meet all in class together, it's difficult for us to share your answer with the rest of the class, but please still do it. The goal of this practice is not to be perfect. The goal is to practice economic thinking. Identify the change, identify the response, and connect the two through a mechanism. This is how economics becomes useful. You do not just memorize vocabulary. You learn to explain the world in a disciplined way. Okay, let me close this demo class with the main message. Economics gives you a way to ask better questions. It helps you see hidden trade-offs. It connects personal choices with global events, and it helps you make better decisions when resources are limited. The stories we discussed today were very different. We talk about concert tickets, rice, yen, phones, Bank of Japan, and AI. But the underlying logic was similar. People face scarcity. They respond to incentives. Their choices create outcomes. And when conditions change, outcomes change too. So when you see a confusing headline, try not to stop at "that is expensive." that is unfair, or that is complicated. Please try to ask the economic questions, such as what changed, who responded, and what trade off appeared. Who gains or who loses? Economics begins with scarcity, but it ends with understanding. That is why economics helps you understand the world. Thank you for listening to this demo class. I hope you have a better understanding of what economics is about, and I hope you get more interested into the field of economics.